How and why did I get into filmmaking? That's a deep question. I got into filmmaking because I wanted to tell stories that had a purpose, stories with meaning, stories that could touch and bring new perspective on the world we live in. I was never, except when I was really young, I was never interested in making films for the purpose of solely entertaining people. I think there's enough of that. I'm kind of personally fed up of that. I want substance, I want content, I want things that make me think and make me reflect on the world today. How I started to be involved in filmmaking, first I guess I started like many of us as a student. And then I started doing camera work because that was the first job I could have as somebody in the industry. Little by little I got more and more into documentary. So I graduated in '97, started doing camera work, working as a cameraman, and little by little leaving TV to do more documentary stuff. And in 2000 I decided to, after an experience to working in a production company as an assistant to the producers for a big company here that was called Sina. We were producing live action and entertainment kind of fiction for kids. I got fed up of all of that and I started my own production company in 2000. And I produced my first documentary as a filmmaker and producer called Chroniques Urbaines, Urban Chronicles, which talked about, it was a point of view that hasn't never been explored in Quebec society. It's about the place of, I was telling the story of like these hip hop artists that made it in the underground, but yet that remained completely unknown in Quebec, even though they had sold like thousands and thousands of albums. So I was interested in bringing that perspective to a larger mainstream audience, so people understand where hip hop comes from, and just to show them that it's not what they think it is. I can tell you more about my film, The United States of Africa, Beyond Hip Hop. It's a film that took me 7 years to produce, to get together, to direct. I started in 2004. I completed the film in 2011. It's basically a film that tells the story of this character called Didi Awadi, who's one of the pioneers of hip hop on the African continent, who was amongst the first to be well known because he was part of a band called Positive Black Soul. And he sets out on a journey to produce an album called African President. And through the making of that album, through the creation of that album, we revisit some historical personalities like Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, Cheikh Anta Diop, and important figures, African revolutionary figures. We revisit them and we meet some hip-hop artists from different countries in Africa. And through that story, I wanted to bring out a history of struggle and liberation struggle on the African continent, so we understand better that Africa is not poor because Africans are inferior. Africa is not poor. Africa is really rich, and there are people who are benefiting from an impoverished Africa. I think today, more and more, there's all these outlets to get your film seen on the internet, on VOD, and theaters, on TV. Yet it's harder and harder to reach the public because the public is everywhere, and it's harder to get attention. So how do you do that? And doing that is a big missing piece of the puzzle, and it's really difficult to generate an audience. So far, we've been in a good position. For United States of Africa, we had 4 Canadian broadcasters involved. We had 1 South African SABC, which is a South African public broadcaster, and we had the NFB as a distributor. So, of course, because of all that backing at the pre-sale level, we had all these outlets to reach, between 500,000 people in Canada to maybe, 800,000 people worldwide, with all the events and the DVDs and the online screening of the film and all of that. So to me, that's encouraging. But I think there's more to be done, and I think the highest you climb, once you get on top, you see that there are highest mountain to climb yet. So there's always more work. You think you've reached something, but in fact you haven't reached anything. It's just the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's where I find myself after 13 years. And I know that there are many mountains to climb yet that are coming, but I'm ready more than ever to go and climb those mountains because of all the experience and all the knowledge that I've acquired throughout these years. Why documentary as opposed to other media forms? I wouldn't put it in opposition. I think I'm interested in the idea of cinema. And to me, cinema is fiction and it's documentary. I don't make a separation. And to me, it's all about telling stories and reaching an audience, touching an audience, and hopefully bring meaning and purpose and vision to a larger public. And that's what I'm interested in. So I couldn't say that I chose documentary. I chose documentary chose me, but I'm not, to me it's not only about documentary, it's first and foremost about telling stories, using the means that you have, using the resources that you have to have an impact on the world, to push people, touch people, provoke people into thinking and to understanding better the world in which we live. That's a very interesting question. The intersection of arts and politics. It's something that has always been a preoccupation to me, and I feel we live in this day and age where entertainment is the supreme value, where politics is excluded from filmmaking and from art in general, other than in very close and small niche circles. And I want to break that. I want to make films for large audience that deal with political issues, and I think that it's not because you talk about political matters that you cannot reach a wide audience. And I just want to break that. There are numerous examples of films that do talk about deep political issues, yet manage to do it in a very, in a way that touches a lot of people. As somebody that's interested by politics and art, I don't believe that because you do that, you have to make a vow of poverty and barely have the means to sustain yourself. And no, I mean, I want to be able to earn a living and have the people work in my team with me to be able to earn a living and make films that matter. So when we look in the mirror, we look at ourselves in the mirror. When we look at our kids, at our children, well, we feel proud of who we are. And we've done it with integrity. And that's what I look for. And that's why I know it's possible to bring art and politics together to make it something that's strong. I'm working on several projects right now, whether in documentary or fiction. On the directing side of things, I'm developing a project right now, which it's a temporary title, but I call it Pan-Africa, where I explore the ideas and ideals of Pan-Africanism through the people who thought about it, to those people who express these ideas of another Africa, of a different Africa, of a Africa that's standing up, that's about struggle, that's about change, that's about positive change, that's about sustainability, not only in terms of environment, but also in terms of the people. Africa is the richest continent in the world, yet Africans are impoverished. Why is that? And I want to tell this history and bring it out there to a larger public so people understand the forces that are at play in the world today and why they are so-called, why is the so-called global South poor and the so-called global North rich? Why are there rich people? Why are there poor people? Are there changes that I would like to see in the support we have for distribution and production of films, of documentaries? Of course, I think that right now we are in a stage where there are some, the broadcasters are not making that much money getting their networks to run with advertising revenues and all that, and they can only do so much to support documentary. And I think we need new funds to support cultural production in Canada. And the only way to get those new funds is by approaching those who are benefiting from the contents that we produce, meaning the ISP, internet service providers, and all these big conglomerates like Bell Media, like Shaw, like Québécois, who are using TV, yet using cable and using fiber optics and internet to provide content in quite very high band content that you can download and watch without investing anything in national local production. So I think that we should put policies in place that these big ISP providers contribute to national production, so we have the funds and the resources to sustain Canadian culture, to sustain our documentaries and fictions and dramas. And I think that that's the next big fight. And it's the same problem in France, it's the same problem in Europe, it's the same problem in the US. Why is it that when we talk about natural resources, everybody agrees that a company that exploits the gas should give back 5, 10, 20, 30% back to the communities? Why is it that ISP provider who pump out the content from our country do not give back anything to the community in terms of royalties? I think Cinema Politica is doing wonderful work. I've been impressed. I've known them, I think, from the beginning. I was curious from the beginning, and I had the opportunity a few years ago to they became friends, and they approached me, and they've rented an office in our space, and we've been together for the last few years, and it's really a privilege for me to share that space with them and to have them by my side, because they remind me of why it's important to make documentaries, because they provide an audience, they provide a public. So we can only come together and make things work. And I think we're part of the same larger community. I make films, they show the films that we do and that others do to the larger public. So I have deep respect for the work of Cinema Politica, and I hope we'll be able to work together in the many years to come.